Only a couple months now. I think I recognize her.
Welcome to The Truth in This Art Beyond, and we're in New Orleans, and I'm your host, Rob Lee. Today, I want to share an interview with an incredibly talented and multidisciplinary artist, originally from a rural town in South Carolina, and has been living in New Orleans for the past 4 years, drawing inspiration from their Colombian heritage and the vibrant culture of the city. A self-taught artist that has been making work for almost a decade and has honed their skills in illustration, embroidery, large-scale sculpture, masking, and costuming. With the focus on creating new worlds and shifting consensus reality, their work is a unique blend of soft sculpture, assemblage, and found objects. Please welcome Basqo. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob. I really appreciate it. Stoked to talk to you finally.
Likewise, I feel like I've been, stalking. It's like, all right, I think I can see part of, if you move that mask to, if I can just crop. In finding out a bit about your work, I'd like to really delve and peel that onion back. I think a lot of creatives have sort of an origin story. So that's what I'm kind of seeking in this sort of introductory question. Could you tell us about some of your early creative interests? And I got some bullet points in there, but I at least want to start off with maybe some of those early creative interests that I think usually kind of pop up in our current work. Like, a podcaster, I did a thing when I was a kid of being an MC, being in front of a stage, talking to people and trying to do a story kind of thing. And I find that I'm still that kid in some ways. So I at least want to ask you in that sort of capacity.
Totally. So, everyone's got their narrative, right? Like the story we tell when people ask us things about, exactly this really, or just anything in general. But mine is it started off one way and it kind of shifted a little bit since I've opened my mind up to what creativity really entails. You know what I mean? So my narrative has been I started working on art at 29 after a conversation with my brother when we were living in the same city, he was an artist. And he was basically like, so what do you do, man? And I was like, I work, I come home, watch Netflix, cook food, whatever. He's like, no, but what do you do? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, what do you have? What do you have? Any hobbies? Anything like that? And I was like, well, no, not really. And he's like, oh man, everybody's gotta have something. And then, that kind of clicked and I was just like, shit, I gotta figure this out, So I was like, well, he's an artist, he draws, he screen prints, all that good stuff. So that was pretty much the kickoff for me, is he kind of just spurred me to think about my time and my life and all those things. And so it just kind of steamrolled from there, to be honest with you. I kind of just took right off and kept moving. But so that's the original narrative that I'd been giving. But after some good conversations with other friends who are artists, I realized that for me, it really began, my creative path began with literature. So I have an English degree. My intent was to go to school and teach English. I've been a voracious reader my whole life. I write, all that kind of good stuff, but I never shared it with people because, sharing writing is pretty vulnerable. And I'm not so great at everything I write is very personal, you know what I mean? And it shows, and it's hard to show that. It's hard to share that. So I kind of just bugged off that for a few years and just did my thing and worked. But I'd say that I probably started writing when I was maybe 11 or 12, something like that. But in terms of visual art, that didn't start until I was 29. So yeah, it's been a weird ride. And I'm 37 now. So, it hasn't been too long, but I'm playing that catch up game, even though that's not really something that this field doesn't lend to catch up. There's no such thing, but
yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think, touching on it where, I didn't know that component about you having the background in writing and being an English major, which definitely this would have really, made the partner oh, another English major. Oh, we're just having a conversation. La, la, la. But it's great. It actually gave me another rapid fire question for you. Yeah. So talk about what your background is and what is the work that you're doing now. Describe some of the work that you're doing now, visually and from a creative standpoint.
Right on. So I think the past year and a half has been where it's really, or maybe 2 years now, I want to say, is where I've really started it started snowballing for me. I kind of hit a groove. I found a groove for myself, you know what I mean? And so I've just kind of been letting that ride. But to rewind it a little bit further back, this whole thing was kicked off by moving to New Orleans, and I didn't move here on purpose. I ended up here, which is really interesting. And apparently that's a common thing, but I guess that's for another time. But yeah, just so prior to living here, I'd been working on all kinds of other stuff, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But moving here, it really just kind of like opened my eyes in a way that like, I was like, oh my God, there's so much creativity around me. Like there's so many people coming out of left field during Carnival with these amazing costumes that, don't do much else throughout the year. And it's not because it's like they can't or don't, it's just like that's their outlet. You know what I mean? And so I kind of just found that vibe and started kind of just following through on that. And I think for me, what was a natural move was towards masks. Yeah. I've had a fascination with masks well before living here. I used to run an Instagram account that was like kind of like an intersection of like leftist politics and masking and culture, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And that's gone now, thank God, because that's a lot of work. But it was more of a research thing for me. But anyhow, back to the masking. Yeah, it just lend itself well to like I guess where I'm at, like in my brain. You know what I mean? Like it's been a wild thing that it really speaks to me. It's a good format. And because of Carnival, there's a lot of masking going around anyways. I mean, that's part of it. So the way I think my brain works is I get very meticulous and very detailed and focused. And I wasn't able to find that with the other forms of art I was working on. And with masking, it just, it really opened up the world for me. It really did. I just like, I don't know. It became this thing where, I started looking into like the cultural aspects, the folklore, and digging into my own histories in that similar way without realizing that's what I was doing, to be honest with you, because I just wasn't self-aware enough at that time to realize that's what I was doing. To me, I was just making stuff to make it. You know what I mean? It's just like, this feels good, I'm going to keep going. But I've kind of opened up a wormhole and started kind of like building a new world for myself and for all the creatures and the characters that I build to inhabit. You know what I mean? And it's been a trip. It really has. But with that, it's hard because like I don't necessarily want to be pigeonholed as the person who makes masks or as a mask maker, or however you want to frame it. Mm-hmm. And it's also like it's not boring to me, but I need something fresh. You know what I mean? Like I need to keep following this conduit that I've been following, and it's moving into like full blown sculpture now. That's where I'm headed towards. So I'm exploring a lot of like bigger ideas of bigger work of like installation size stuff, like kind of taking over the gallery space or what have you, as opposed to just like, mounting 10 masks on a wall and calling it a day. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to see the gallery, the show as an experience, as opposed to a place to just display things. Because that's really what it is for me. It's like I want to bring the viewer into self. I want to kind of like find ways to make things seem familiar yet bizarre or surreal, and provide like anchor points throughout for like them to just like touch onto it. So it like you're in for a ride, but you're recognizing things. You may not know where you recognize them from or where you know them from, and maybe I don't either. I don't know. But the point is that like the idea is to have like this kind of like these opposing feelings, kind of finding a middle ground to like, but yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I've been thinking a lot about like working with like ceramics and things like that too, just to find different ways to explore this like this mood I'm in right now, where I need bigger, I need more involved, I need, yeah.
I think thank you. And I think it's important to be able to kind of ride that wave and, Corey is saying this, but being able to ride that wave. And, as I was, kind of talking a little bit before we got started of like, this is where I can kind of see the sort of, project going and the direction is going. And, for the longest time, like I've been podcasting 14 years. I was 24. Wow. Now I'm 38. And I was in this sort of spot of like, oh, I'm going to tell off-color jokes and look at weird news. And now I'm, being able to talk to people who do really interesting work and be able to have a meaningful conversation with them. And I didn't see what that looked like. And now just kind of really being emboldened and trusting that, oh no, I can do this as well. Let me, maybe transfer and translate this sort of same idea, this sort of same language into maybe this next medium. Maybe it's a TV show, maybe it's a documentary, maybe it's something else, but really thinking it through. So if larger size and ceramics and kind of this is the next step in the progress in the process, rather, rock and roll. Let's do it. Let's make it happen.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, it sounds very similar to what you're feeling too. Just like the format where you're at is good, but you're looking to, maybe just keep riding it, that vibe. So for sure,
it's making your own style in some sense. It's going to sound really corny, but it's a little Bruce Lee. It's like, my style is not to have a style. It's that sort of thing.
Exactly. I go where I want and where I need to be right then and that time. And that's it, really. I'm doing this for me at the end of the day, Yeah.
So, you talked about having like the sort of like the viewer or what have you and kind of being embedded in it. So from the listener standpoint, let's step back a little bit and talk about what the process is and like, how did you go about developing your skills and sort of this mass creation, this development, this, like, I'm still not sure how you make them. That's the thing. I'm sitting here. I was like, hold on, how? What? I mean, I had some concept, right? I went to Mardi Gras World. I saw a robot in there making floats. And I'm like, look, I don't know what's happening down here in the Big Easy anymore. So, enlighten us, please.
Totally. So just to be sure, you want me to talk more about like the process of how I make masks, or like in general, like
the process of how you make masks and any other thing that you want to touch on, like from like your creations, like whether it's moving to the sculpture part. I really want to get embedded.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I guess the easy answer first is like the technical process of mask making, at least because I mean, there's a million ways to do it and I'll do it a little different every time kind of thing. But for what's worked for me really well in the past couple of years is and this is all trial and error as it goes, there's no wrong or right way to do it. There's just better ways for you, or if you're going for a specific look or what have you. But anyhow, for me, I like to use foam and hardware cloth, which is like chicken wire, but it's more of like on a grid system, and it helps me plot out, where I want the eyes, the nose, that kind of thing. And so a lot of this stuff is like in my mind, you know what I mean? Like after I cover the hardware cloth with foam and all, I mean, I can't see that anymore, you know what I mean? But it's more about just like blocking it out mentally in a way. Yeah. And so it goes from building the form itself and using those materials, and then it's usually like I tend to just kind of like gather supplies as I go. Like I'm like, oh, this color, this texture's nice, whatever, like, oh, this is really cool. I can take this apart and make it into these things. And so I wish you'd been able to see my studio. I have like a probably 40 little tubs that I have all of my materials separated by color, texture, what it's composed of. And it's all like, how I like it organized. Someone could go down there and change it themselves. But so I get the forms built and I find my fabric that I'm looking for. And then I start, the fun part is what I call it, where I start like, adorning it, in other words, in terms of how do I get to that spot. So that's kind of like the tricky gray area for me. When I first started, it was just like, make the thing, you'll figure it out as you go along, blah, 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 and like, so to some extent, it's still in that capacity, but it does eat up a lot of time to make something just not on the fly, but like, moment to moment. So I've started moving more towards just thinking about things before I step into the studio, so I can have an idea of like, oh, this pattern's going to look really great if I, do this with it, or, if I take, these pearl cabochons and order them in this certain way and like do these crazy big spirals, I think it'd look really nice, and like, oh, I've got this big, ruby that I've been waiting on and sitting on for a year. I think it's going to look good for this one, and at the same time as I'm doing that, I'm finding the character that I build, because I do have names and backstories and little anecdotes for all these little characters. And it kind of just like coalesces together, to be honest with you. I don't have right now, I'm not in the stage, or, I'm not the type of person that orders it all out to begin with and then moves to building. It all kind of like goes together, intertwining. I see my frustrations with it for sure, because it's like planning is nice. You can go faster if you do, but I love the inspiration, moments of inspiration I find when I'm like sorting through these thousands of little objects, like handling them all, touching them all. Like it really brings me into like a meditative place, and that is something that's very important for me when I'm making art.
Mm.
It is a healing process for me for sure. Now, in terms of like, then to be sure, you wanted to know more about like moving into like larger scale sculpture and things like. Okay, right
Yeah,
on.
please.
So I think that for me is coming from the desire to push further, to be honest with you, to push further into this world that I'm building, or worlds, or however it turns out to be at the end of the day, you know. And yeah, I've been driven since, I don't even know, gosh, maybe, yeah. So I started making art around 9 years ago, something like that. Let's just say nine. And maybe 5 years ago or so is when I started being like, I want to make things that I want to see in the world. Like, and with that, I'd like to get a little of a background to you. With
Please.
so I was living in Portland, Oregon for a few years, and my brother and I and some friends decided to get together, and because like my brother and I have been talking, you know, there's lots of protests in Portland. It's constant. It's kind of like a culture in a sense.
Yeah.
And for me, it there needs to be more than just anger and militancy and whatever have you. You know, there needs to be an element of joy. There needs to be a reminder that, you know, that we're here for a reason, yes, but we're also going to make this as good of a time as we can, because it's inherently stressful to be in a situation like that. So it's and for my frustrations on that end was not seeing things that I thought should be present at a protest. And so that goes back into the history of like, you know, bringing giant puppets to protests, you know, that kind of stuff, dressing up in costume, you know, creating a spectacle in a way, seizing the spectacle, because it's like, yeah, the news reporters there and people taking photos, it's like, okay, cool, there's a billion people here with signs and some of them are funny, but what about that giant Grim Reaper in the background, like 12 feet tall, amongst this crowd of 10,000 people? What's up with that? So that's kind of like the desire I had to push forward into this direction now, is creating the things that I want to see.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's intrinsic to a person. You know, you have, self has these desires of these things that self wants to see. They may not be what you want to see, but if I'm the person that's gonna create them, that's even better, because I get to make it how I want. So the idea is to move into towards that direction again, and making larger scale puppets, but in this capacity, keeping them as a stationary sculpture, and not designed to be like moved around and carried and what have you. Just to like, so I'm really leaning into like the idea of taking this kind of like the history I have now of all these masks I've created, all these characters I've created, and taking those types of same approaches to the larger scale sculptures. Like, you know, just create, like, honestly, some of these masks to me feel kind of eerie looking, and I'm okay with that. You know, like they've got this blank expression on their face, or maybe it's not blank. I don't know.
It's in the eyes. It's in the eyes every time.
That is it. And the eyes are what I do last every time for that reason, because that's what gets it, you know. And so yeah, so I've been looking forward to taking a lot of the skills I've learned on these like smaller scale projects and pushing them out into bigger stuff, because frankly, while it does take a long time to make a mask, if I'm using that same process on a much larger scale sculpture, it might be around the exact same amount of time, simply because it's just like you go faster when it's bigger, in other words.
Yeah.
So I'll go a little bit faster. But yeah, so I'm currently building some like small prototypes, because I've never sculpted before. I don't know honestly what I'm doing, but you know, I've got friends I can ask, and if nothing else, I got here without anybody to rely on. I'll figure it out. I'll cobble it together if I have to. But you know,
because you're self-taught, right? And
yeah,
having that sort of background. So talk about that a little bit, like, you know, and getting that, like, are you more oriented around like learning by doing, figuring it out? Is there sort of that YouTube university? Is it sort of, hey, I know I'm in this sort of creative community, or around this creative community? You've mentioned your brother before as artist. You know, is it that part of it? Like, talk about how, you know, gaining this sort of knowledge. Like, there was no real roadmap when I started in doing this.
Right.
And it was kind of like, all right, I'm listening to a lot of Kevin Smith. Maybe he's going to drop some gems. I was listening to a lot of Smodcasts, and it's like, maybe he's going to drop some gems. And he was like, yeah, I have this Fast Track Pro. I'm sitting there taking copious notes. Fast Track Pro. How's that spelled? And, you know, trying to get the stuff. And remember going to Best Buy, buying the gear or what have you, spending way too much because now I know better.
As it
But
goes. Mhm.
but how was that learning process for you introductorily, and now as you kind of are shifting into this larger scale part of the venture and part of the arts journey?
So it's similarly to you. I've had it's been a lot of trial and error and learning things the hard and expensive way, you know. There is no, on the mind of things, there's no real roadmap to like how to build a giant puppet to take to a protest. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely like, I always think of them as puppet houses in the same sense of like a fashion house, but it's basically groups that have been around for decades that do this. And so they offer like books and how-tos, but frankly, all that stuff is just on paper. You know, the best way to learn is from someone else showing you their process, and you can tweak that to yours. So up until probably about a year and a half ago, it was just that same rough learning, like spend too much money, spend too much time. I'm going to do this myself, blah, blah, blah. And I'm hitting a wall now with that, because a large part of what drives me in my art, in my life is feeling like every day is my last, or it could be my last. So I'm frankly just tired of wasting time, you know? So like I've been doing a lot of like research in terms of like how to, you know, I'll go on YouTube. I mean, I haven't got a subscription to the Stan Winston School yet, but that's on my docket. And yeah, like I think a lot of folks around me, you know, they've got more experience and time building like these larger scale things than I do. And, you know, I'm going to start reaching out as it goes and see what tips, you know, like pitfalls, that kind of stuff. We actually had two friends of ours, they threw a workshop last year for this guy named Andrew Kim, who is now a good friend, and this is what his life is puppet making shows, things like that, big, large scale puppets. He does workshops. And so they invited him, and he taught all of us in this like super intensive, like, I want to say 10-day workshop, where like a group of us put some stuff together and paraded it around and all that. So I'm definitely leaning more into like finding what's taught as the right way, or like proper ways to do it, and seeing what I like and don't like about it, or frankly what I can afford or not to, you know, to do, because some of this stuff's pretty expensive up. But you know, I make do. I find a lot of good scraps. I get given stuff a lot too, thankfully. So, but yeah, that's pretty much the timeline of that. Like learning the hard way, and now I'm just like, nope. I can learn the hard way where I have to, but I don't need to every time. You know, I don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, and you know, I think there's a kinship in that regard where, you know, every now and again, I like to go back in. Is there a way I can improve this process? Is there a way I can do it? And, you know, I try to kind of what I was saying before we got started is like, I'm going to record my intro later, because I know that's going to kind of like be in the way. And I've learned that versus trying to stumble through it multiple times. It's like, that's, you know, sure, some people have that ego of give me my credentials, but really it's like the conversation is actually the main course here. You know, the rapid fire is the dessert part. So keep that in mind. But the intro is just like being seated. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, here's your table, sir, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah, that's real. Yeah. So you've learned that for your process, it's easier just to knock it out on the back end kind of thing. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Because, you know, I think it allows us to have a little bit more time to actually, you know, connect and have a conversation. And I think people are a bit more open. And I didn't learn that into doing it a lot, you know, and kind of thinking in some of the early interviews, like, oh, this person hates me. I don't know why. It's like because they're probably nervous, and you're asking them about stuff. They're like, "What the hell? Okay, sure, I'll tell you about my work." You ask a lot of questions, bro. It's an interview, you know. So I see that you have a Colombian heritage. So you have, you know, that's embedded. And you're, you know, from South Carolina. You have the, you know, that portion of Portland you were describing. So, you know, having sort of those different influences that float in, and any other influence that floats in as far as your background, because we're very multidimensional individuals here. Talk about like New Orleans in terms of the influence that you've like kind of gotten from it, from an artistic or personal or professional sort of standpoint, and how does that impacted your life, you know, being down there and being in that environment?
Totally. So I think there's two answers to this question, or two parts to the answer, I guess. I think there's the cultural aspect, and then the aspect of being surrounded by creatives and artists. So the cultural aspect, I think, displays a lot, just like on the aesthetic level of my work. just back again to like the parade culture, the masking culture, the carnival culture, the do what you wanna, all that good stuff. And I think that I really connected with that in a lot of ways, like many people who visit do, or who move here do. I mean, it's almost impossible to ignore. It's in your face. You can't duck it or dodge it. There's no way. But I think a large part. So to give a bit background here, I'm a person who, again, I love to read, voracious reader, but I think it's very important to learn the history of a place that I'm not from if I'm living there. And I've only lived in two places outside of my hometown. So, New Orleans has a wealth of history beyond, and so does the history of Carnival, the history of Mardi Gras, all the tragedies and triumphs that have occurred. So my first year here, I didn't have many friends, I didn't have work, so I spent a lot of time at the library checking out books, documentaries, reading, trying to learn the ins and outs of where I am, and then Carnival happened. And everything I'd read it did not prepare me for what I was walking into. It did not prepare me. I mean, and I think there's a few different divisions of groups of people who I think reflect very intensely on my work. And the primary one would be the Mardi Gras Indians. There's just absolutely no way to say no. I mean, like their whole thing is looking pretty. They want to look pretty. And I feel that. I feel it, when I step out with a mask on, I want to like just feel like $1 million, like it just feels good to feel good. And you be a different person behind that mask too. It's really liberating. It's really nice. You tap into this side of yourself that you didn't know was there. And being able to experience that in a crowd of thousands of people is incredible. Being able to watch the Mardi Gras Indians perform on Super Sunday, incredible. Like the culture and the lore that goes, it's beyond me. I mean, it's wild stuff. I've gotten the privilege to meet a couple of folks that are in the Indian community. A few friends of mine have been involved even heavier, and it's really amazing to like just be around, it's like the aura is there. And so the other thing that in terms of the culture is the history and the secrecy of a lot of these carnivals, or the parading crews and the crews that throw balls. And to be sure, I think it's worth saying that a lot of the reason that these older crews were secretive is because of racism. I mean, that's really it. They were rich, and they were white, and they were, up at the top of the social hierarchy, and that's kind of where they wanted to maintain. And they wanted to maintain all of their business relationships secret too. And a lot of these balls and parades and crews were functions to do just that, to remain anonymous. And so I think I took a lot from that idea. Like, I love the idea of being secret out in the open. You know what I mean? When you put on a mask, like only your friends know who you are, and only the ones that saw you make it. And I think that's wonderful. I love that. And that happens a lot here. I mean, I don't recognize 90% of the people when we're out on Mardi Gras Day. It's awesome. But yeah, it really, in terms of like, again, to the culture, like, so I'm in a space where I am a transplant, and almost everyone I know is a transplant. With I'd say probably 90% of the people I know are. So there's a different side to Mardi Gras as that. You know what I mean? Like, there's the touristy aspect, as we talked about, like the huge parades, like the 10,000 people ones or whatever. And then, we've got like people that are native to New Orleans who have their own Mardi Gras. We've got the Indians who've got their own Mardi Gras, and so like, it's almost like on this end of things, it's a little different. And with the intention of like not trying to step into other people's worlds. You know what I mean? It's like, this isn't for me in a lot of ways, but here's a space where I can be myself, and I can be who I want to be. And it's in the sense of like respect, and also in a sense of being able to chase your own dreams in that capacity. And that's what I love about it. So with that, just again, seeing so many people around me who left field, never would have thought they could bust out a costume in a mask or a headpiece or whatever, and they're showing up, and I'm like, oh my God, are you serious right now? So it's really inspiring to see that, like, to see people that don't really give a thought to it beyond just carnival season, and be like, yo, you know what? Like, if they can do that, I can do that too. Like, I have it in me, I've got that creativity to push with that. And I think that's a good segue. That's almost the exact same point, but like, the next part of it is the people around me, like that's so with that as a contextual thing, being able to see like friends of mine build these floats out of nothing, and we, it's like a DIY parade, and like there's maybe 300 people rolling down the street, and like there's just booty shaking music going off, and like everyone's dancing and yelling, and like there's these crazy costumes that you won't see at the bigger parades, you know what I mean? Like it's just outlandish stuff, and it's all on theme and all that good stuff. And so it's really inspiring to see like the amount of work and energy and like the elbow grease that people throw this stuff together with. And I count myself fortunate that I'm now part of a group of like that, and I'm able to like express and bring people together with like a vibe that myself and my friends really want to put out there. So
thank you. That's great. And
absolutely. I'm a little long-winded today. I'm sorry.
No. And that fits in very well with pretty much with the theme of these interviews. Kind of this sort of love letter for New Orleans and coming out, on Mardi Gras, definitely.
The greatest city on earth, man. No
hey, that's us. That's us. That's the Baltimore. We literally have it written somewhere. It's on the benches. But, I like New Orleans a lot. That's I'll share this with you before we get to these rapid fire questions, because sure. I think you got everything in here, and I think it's great.
Right on.
One of the reasons I first went down into New Orleans was I got down there. I was dating a girl. We broke up, and I had a ticket to go visit her. And the money that I had there for that ticket was enough that I could go to South Carolina and New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
And I went to both in a week. South Carolina was a different vibe. I was going further south. I was just following shrimp and grits. That's just literally what it was. And I went down there to New Orleans by myself. I didn't know what to do. I stayed out there at the airport. I was just like, this is really bad. I don't know what I'm doing. And
yeah.
And so I was shuttled in every day and into the quarter, and just really kind of like started to fall in love with it really, really slowly, and enjoyed it. And one of the reasons it popped up, it's going to be a very odd reason. One of the reasons that New Orleans was even on the radar outside of knowing the stuff, the stereotypical touristy sort of things, and like I knew the Saints, knew the Pelicans, totally. or the Hornets at the time, what have you. And I remember this bit from Hannibal Buress about going to New Orleans.
Oh my God, I love that bit so much.
And that was the thing that put me over the top.
Yeah.
And I think you'll like this piece. I was literally today at this point, I was going to a coffee shop, and it was a young lady there that kept like looking in my direction and kept laughing. And I was like, what is she laughing at? What is she know? And she asked me before I left, she's like, has anybody ever told you look like Hannibal Buress? I thought you were Hannibal Buress.
That is hilarious.
It's just the full circleness of it.
Wow. Serendipity right there. Yep.
100%. This is the only podcast I've shared all of that over. So there you go. All right. So my friend, it's time for us to go into the rapid fire portion of the afternoon.
Let's do it.
I've added a couple since you were talking. All right, here you go.
Yes.
What did you have for breakfast?
I had a slice of crawfish king cake.
I'm jealous. I am jealous.
I told you.
I'm jealous. I'm really tight about this. This is BS. All right, I'm gonna keep it rolling. So you touched on like looking like $1 million, right? Going out there, and your masks are like they're striking, from the eyes to the color, and just all of the work that goes in. I see the attention to detail and the work that goes into it as I'm gassing you up more and more and more. What is your favorite color combination? Whether it is to wear, whether it is to see, whether it is to work within.
My favorite colors are red, yellow, and orange. Yep.
Those go together, by the way.
Yes, exactly. I love those colors. I would stay in there forever if I could. But yeah.
Okay. Name an artist that made you fall in love with art.
Oof.
Yeah.
An artist that made me fall in love with art.
Funny if you say, I'm not in love with art at all. We're in a long distance relationship. I'm like, all right, then, cool.
We're trying. No, wow, that's a tough one, actually. Like, I'd say the probably my easiest answer would be my brother. I mean, that's it. He brought me to it. He helped me along the way. I would remember text him I would text him at all hours. I was working a 9 to 5 at the time when I first started drawing, and I'd go home, get home 6 o'clock, draw till midnight, and just be texting him the whole time, just like, hey, what do you think? What do you think? So he really like held my hand, walked me through it, and he made me realize it was completely accessible. Where at the beginning, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know who to talk to, none of that. So yeah, definitely him, and he definitely like showed me a bunch of other artists that I still am really into today. Like his art was magical to me. He created these worlds and these scenes that really just, it spoke to me. You know what I mean? My brother, him being my brother aside, for sure. Yeah. So I'd have to go with my brother.
It's about brothers. It's about brothers. My brother's sort of in the same way. I guess I'm the creative one, but he's like the biggest fan. Just like, yeah, man. So that podcast, right? How did that work out? I'm like, you asked me about process of my podcast? Oh my gosh, I never asked.
That's awesome.
And I like to incorporate, so the food question, your crawfish king cake, I'm still tight about that. Is oriented around sort of this notion of artists, creatives having this sort of consideration for self-care, right? So make sure people are eating, make sure people are getting rest. So in that vein, how many hours of sleep do you typically get?
Oof, 6 hours. 6 hours on a good day. Yeah. The older I get, the earlier I wake up, no matter what. I went out the other night and we were at the bar till like 2 a.m. The last half an hour of being at home, not on my radar. Don't know what happened. Woke up at 7:30. Couldn't get back to sleep. It's a curse, but here we are. So,
look, this morning, some goofy person and I had my window open because it's a little warm up here, and I can smell like I woke up at like 2 a.m. I was like, what is that smell? That's like someone like laying asphalt, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I couldn't go back to sleep, so I came into the studio and started working on editing on my podcast at like 2:30 in the morning.
Oh my God!
And
yep.
I slept for like an hour and a half, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to sleep. And I was like, it is 5:30. And I was like, I'm going to go to the gym at 7.
Oh,
yeah. And this is like the midway point of my day as we're talking right now.
Jesus, Lord, no.
Yeah. It's all going to fall apart.
But yeah.
It's all going to fall apart. Let's see. So this is the penultimate one, if you will.
Sure.
What's the book that you've read the most?
The book that I've read the most. I think if we're talking cover to cover, it's probably The Stand by Stephen King.
Nice.
I've read that a lot, and I've been a big Stephen King fan since I was a little kid, like way before I should have started reading them. But again, here we are. So
here we are.
Yeah, I've read that one a lot for sure. Yeah.
Welcome to Derry, coming soon. So this one popped up because I don't know if you heard it. Maybe you have. Has your work ever been compared to your masks and such? Ever been compared to the visuals from Where the Wild Things Are?
Sure have. Yep, that is one of my easily biggest influences of like childhood, and I think that a lot of my influences that are like, they're the ones that like kind of slap you in the face. You know what I mean? That is up there with them for sure, and like that is not accidental by any means. So the first one I made that kind of resembled that, I was like, oh wow, that's something else. It looks like, like a little bizarro little wild thing, but yeah, I'm obsessed with it, honestly. Like I've spent I don't know how much time trying to figure out how the Jim Henson team built those puppets. Like I bought the behind the scenes book. I've gotten the DVD with the behind the scenes. I've gotten, all kinds of other things that they've put out, or I've gone on YouTube just to try and find videos about it. Like I'm obsessed. And like ever since I was a little kid, my favorite books have been the ones with furry little monsters in them. That's just it. And it came out, and I didn't realize it until someone pointed it out to me, and I was just like, damn. Yeah, you're right. That's fine. That's fine. I don't care. I love it. I'm here for it. I'm just gonna keep going crazier though.
I love it. So that's pretty much it for the podcast. Thank you for indulging me and indulging the podcast and just being a great guest. And
thank you so much. Seriously.
100%. And I want to invite and encourage you to share with the listeners where they can check out your work, website, social media. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, fortunately, it's one spot only, and that is Instagram. And that is Instagram.com. And my handle is BASQO_. So Basqo_. And that's me. That's all I got.
And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Basqo for coming on and sharing his story. And I'm Rob Lee, saying that there's art, culture, and community in and around your neck of the woods. You just have to look for it.